story time with any Gina.
Once upon a time, in a peaceful village surrounded by green forests and towering mountains, there flowed a river unlike any other. The villagers called it the Enchanted River. Its waters were as clear as crystal, and they sparkled under the sunlight like millions of tiny jewels. The river twisted and turned through the valley, bringing life to the land. It nourished the crops, provided fish for the villagers, and quenched the thirst of all who lived nearby. The villagers believed the river was a gift from the spirits of the mountains, and they treated it with great respect. But there was one thing the villagers knew deep down: the river was not like other rivers. There were legends, ancient stories passed down through generations, that warned of a terrible curse that would befall anyone who tried to take more from the river than it was willing to give. The river, it was said, was enchanted with a magic that could not be controlled. Only those with pure hearts and good intentions could enjoy its blessings. Anyone who sought to exploit its power would awaken its fury. For many years, the villagers lived in harmony with the river, careful not to take too much. But as with all things in life, greed began to stir. It was a quiet greed at first, small things like taking a few extra fish or watering the crops with too much water. Yet over time, the greed grew, and the villagers became more careless. They began to believe that the river's gifts were endless, that it could provide for them no matter how much they took. One summer, when the harvest had been particularly good and the village was prospering, a stranger arrived. He was a tall man with sharp features, dressed in dark clothes. His eyes were deep and mysterious, like to pools of shadow, and he carried a staff made of twisted wood. He introduced himself as Orin, a traveler seeking shelter for the night. The villagers, eager to show their hospitality, invited him to stay at the village inn. Orin was different from anyone the villagers had ever met. He was charming and spoke in a soft, hypnotic voice. He listened carefully to their stories and seemed to know things about the land that no outsider could possibly know. He spoke of faraway places and powerful magic, and the villagers, impressed by his knowledge, soon grew to trust him. It wasn't long before Orin began to ask questions about the Enchanted River. He asked about its origins, about the legends, about its powers. He listened with intense interest as the villagers spoke of the river's magic and the curse that protected it. Orin smiled when he heard the stories. He did not fear the river's curse. Instead, he saw it as a challenge, a riddle that he could solve. He was a sorcerer, skilled in ancient and powerful magic, and he believed he could unlock the true power of the Enchanted River. He knew that with such power, he could become the most powerful man in the world. One night, when the moon was high and the village was asleep, Orin sneaked away from the inn and made his way to the river. The air was thick with the scent of the forest, and the sounds of night creatures echoed in the distance. But Orin's mind was focused on only one thing: the river. He stood on the bank and gazed into the clear waters, feeling the magic stirring beneath the surface. With a deep breath, he raised his staff and muttered an incantation under his breath. The words were ancient and powerful, a language forgotten by most. As he spoke, the air around him began to crackle with energy. The waters of the river shimmered, and the earth trembled beneath his feet. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Then, suddenly, the river's calm surface rippled violently. A gust of wind whipped through the trees, and a low rumbling sound echoed from the depths of the water. Orin smiled. He thought he had succeeded, but he had made a terrible mistake. The river's magic was not meant to be controlled. It was a force of nature, ancient and wild, and it would not be tamed by a man's ambition. The waters of the river began to churn and writhe like a living creature. A dark mist rose from the surface, and the air turned cold. Orin's smile faltered as he realized that the river was no longer responding to him. It was rejecting him. The river's fury was unleashed. The ground beneath Orin's feet cracked open, and the river surged forward, pulling him into its depths. His staff shattered, and the magic he had called upon turned against him. The water swirled around him, pulling him deeper and deeper into the darkness of the river. A voice echoed in his mind, a voice like the whispers of the wind and the crashing of waves. "You have disturbed the balance," the voice said. "The curse has been awakened, and now you shall pay the price." Orin tried to fight, but the river's power was too strong. It pulled him under, and with a final scream, He vanished into the depths, never to be seen again. The river calmed once more, but the damage had been done. The next morning, the villagers awoke to find the river changed. Its waters, once clear and beautiful, were now dark and murky, swirling with unnatural energy. The air around it was thick with a strange tension, as if the river itself was angry. No one knew what had happened to Orin, but they knew that something terrible had occurred. As the days passed, the curse of the enchanted river began to take its toll on the village. Crops withered in the fields, and the animals grew sick and died. The villagers tried everything they could think of: prayers, offerings, sacrifices, but nothing worked. The river's curse could not be lifted. Years went by, and the once thriving village became a shadow of its former self. The villagers no longer went near the river, and the land around it became barren and lifeless. The enchanted river had become a symbol of fear, its once beautiful waters now a source of destruction. But not everyone believed that the river was truly cursed. There was one person in the village who still believed that the river's magic could be restored. Her name was Lyra, a young woman with a brave heart and a sharp mind. She had grown up hearing the stories of the river and its curse, but she was determined to find out the truth. She had heard whispers that the curse could only be broken by someone pure of heart, someone who could understand the river's magic and restore its balance. One day, after much thought and planning, Lyra set out on a journey to find the source of the river. She knew that, if anyone could break the curse, it would be someone who understood the magic of the river, someone who respected its power. The journey was long and dangerous, but Lyra was undeterred. She crossed forests filled with wild animals, scaled steep cliffs, and waded through thick swamps. Along the way, she spoke to wise elders, read ancient scrolls, and listened to the stories of travelers who had passed through the lands. Finally, after many days, Lyra arrived at the source of the river, an ancient cave hidden deep in the mountains. The cave was said to be the birthplace of the river, where the spirits of the mountains had first breathed life into the waters. As she entered the cave, the air grew thick with magic, and she felt the weight of the river's power all around her. At the heart of the cave, Lyra found a large stone, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It was the heart of the river, the source of its magic. The stone pulsed with energy, and Lyra knew that this was where the balance of the river had been broken. She stepped forward and placed her hands on the stone. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, asking the spirits of the mountains to forgive the greed that had disturbed the river's balance. She promised to restore the river to its rightful place, to protect it, and to respect its magic. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the stone began to glow brighter, and the cave filled with a warm, golden light. The air hummed with power, and Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had done it. She had restored the balance. When Lyra returned to the village, the river was no longer dark and cursed. Its waters had returned to their crystal-clear state, sparkling in the sunlight. The crops grew once more, the animals returned, and the villagers rejoiced. They hailed Lyra as a hero, and her bravery became a legend passed down through generations. The enchanted river was once again a symbol of life, a reminder of the power of respect and the importance of balance. Lyra's name was spoken with reverence, and her story was told to every child born in the village. And so, the river flowed peacefully once more, its waters a gift to all who treated it with care. The curse had been lifted, not by magic alone, but by the courage and wisdom of one young woman who had dared to challenge the forces of greed. Thank you for watching. Please click on the subscribe button now if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet. Love from Storytime with Auntie Gina.